morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here for a captivating session on the defining issue of the century. We know the 21st century is likely to be a century dominated by two superpowers that have now we have China that has emerged in the last 50 years as a leader worldwide. We've seen how it is challenging an established power, namely the United States. And we kind of see that crisis, previous challenger to the supremacy of the United States after World War II, namely the Soviet Union. We've seen, these issues being resolved, being sidelined one by one, and it looks like this is the ultimate game, the ultimate match, the ultimate confrontation is USA-China in the 21st century. And we've had issues similar to that confrontation in the past, namely the in the Greek world, the Thucydides trap. We had emerging Athens against Sparta, and I like to show that because this confrontation of an emerging power against an established brought down the golden age of the Greek civilization. And so we do not want to be collateral of a confrontation between two superpowers. We know that these two economies alone account for, let's say, just in carbon emissions, half of the world carbon emissions, if we are to resolve only climate change. Small problem to resolve. So plenty of issues to be dealt with, plenty of opportunities for solving global issues. And we're going to see in this panel whether the venues for collaborations will prevail over venues or ways, over confrontation, which we'd like to avert. And so I'm really pleased to introduce a prestigious panel. We're very pleased at MEDays to have an important Chinese delegation. It's a pleasure to have you among us. And I'm just going to go over you from China, and then I'll introduce our US panelists later. So we have Ambassador Fu Ying, who's the chairperson of the National People's Congress Foreign Affairs Committee. You were ambassador in the UK and Australia, so you've got an extensive experience, a diplomatic experience with the world affairs. We have Mr. Yao Yang, economist, prestigious economist in Chinese academia, an expert at the Beijing University. We've got Xiao Lei, expert in also value chain, having obviously experience in industrial policy and great power competition. We've got experts on Belt and Road Initiative and Europe, namely in the person of Yi Wei-yang, director of the Center of European Studies. And so, interestingly enough, many of you have had backgrounds in the United States as academia, and reciprocally in the US. So that's why it's interesting to have these profiles on both sides. And to introduce the US side, if I may, I'd like to start with Asha Kali Castleberry Hernandez. Welcome here. You're a former senior executive official at the Department of State and have extensive experience in Near Eastern affairs. As an advisor of the Secretary of State, Assistant Secretary of State. And you've had missions at the UN and peacekeeping operations. We've got, you've obviously studied China extensively, law and business through Syracuse University at a program at Oxford. So just to mention that plenty of experience both ways in trying to know each other between China and the US. We've got obviously Philip P.J. Crowley, former Assistant Secretary of State and Speaker of the State Department at a critical moment. obviously you were at the National Security Council during the Clinton period, and you've been designated among the wise man in 2011 by the Atlantic magazine, one of the brave thinker, because you have weathered obviously a lot of crisis while at the State Department, both in terms of global challenges and ethical challenges as well, because in the end we live in a rule-based value system that we need to sustain, and that is important. We have Mark Ellenbogen, whose extensive experience stretches obviously from a foundation, the Global Panel Foundation, which also looks at ethical issues and fight against corruption in Central and Eastern Europe. And so you have been very active, obviously, at the government level previously, and you are also contributed to the Atlantic Eye, providing an experience with the diplomacy across the Atlantic. And last but not least, we have a representative, at least geographically, from the European Union in this USA-China panel, in the person of Fabian Zuleg, Chief Executive of the European Policy Center, who specializes actually in Europe's fundamental transformation from technological revolution, climate change, demographic change, and the permacrisis. It's a term that you have coined to describe what Europe is going through in terms of disruptions. So, without further ado, I just want to highlight in the debate what is interesting here. We'd like to have a conversation. It's going to stretch for about 40 minutes, then we'll open it to the audience. And what I can see from the biggest confrontation of the century, USA and China, is that at least in terms of on a personal level, we had on the US administration a recent nomination as Undersecretary of State in the person of Kurt Campbell. He was the Asia coordinator during the Obama administration. He's the pretty much driving person behind the pivot to Asia of the Obama administration, has been with Biden, also at the National Security Council, experts on China, and the Tsar actually on this relation. So it's a term that is coined within the administration. And equally in China, we have a similar pattern emerging, namely in the person of the foreign minister, Wang Yi, who actually was also a scholar at Georgetown University, University, and has been Minister of Foreign Affairs from 2012 to 2020 plus, and went up to chair the Central Foreign Affairs Commission, which supervises the foreign ministry that he is now foreign minister of. So you can see that on both sides, efforts are being made to make sure that protagonists understand each other, know each other very well, and that shows how important it is not to fall into misunderstandings or misalignment of objectives. So my first question will be to you, Mrs. Ambassador Ying. What would you think would be the biggest challenge to that coexistence between China emerging as an economic superpower and the US wanting to maintain its role that it has enjoyed until now?
Thank you very much. We just moved from the previous session where we already started discussions on these matters. The topic about China-US relations, it's been 5 years since the start of the trade war launched during the Trump administration. And by far, I think on the Chinese side, there is enough understanding of what is going on. Although from 5 years ago, all through during our discussions with our American colleagues, American scholars, I asked many people, what are we competing for when U.S. said that there is a strategic competition with China, and what is the end game? What is the winning point when the U.S. say that we have to outcompete China? I haven't heard a very clear answer on these questions. But now I think from our observation, trade war, science, the sanctions on technology and human rights debate, security debate, all these are symptomatic of a deeper issue, which is a power rivalry. I think fundamentally speaking, if I can answer the question, what are we competing for? I think on the U.S. side, U.S. is trying to prevent China taking over American hegemonistic power in the world. But on the Chinese side, that is not. We don't have such an ambition or plan or strategy to compete for hegemonism. We've been against hegemonism ever since we opened up to the world, ever since we engaged the world widely. So we won't be a hegemonistic power ourselves. So on the Chinese side, we feel that we are at the receiving end of this U.S. bashing China, and we're fighting back. Recently in San Francisco, the Chinese president told the U.S. president that we didn't have such a plan. We don't have such a plan to compete for world power. He also said the U.S. should not try to bash China and contain China. And I think the San Francisco dialogue is, according to the news on the Chinese side, is the discussions were candid, were deep, and the Chinese side would like to call it San Francisco vision, hoping that at next stage the two sides will try to respect each other, work on the things they can work on, especially dealing with the global issues. They should work on these things and try to manage the competitive elements in the relationship. There have been some impressive agreements, especially they agreed to work on for a success of COP28. So we'll soon see whether the two countries will truly honor what they are committed to. And there is also agreement on resuming the high-level military dialogue, which is very important. And they will set up a working group on anti-narcotics, which is important. And I myself, I'm pleased for the Chinese students that there will be more, the wording is a significant increase of direct flight since early next year, and encouragement of students' exchanges, which are very good news. So I think we can cautiously expect that there will be more stable interactions, more stable relationship. But the differences between what you said, so cities trap, is that at that time there was a real competition for power. But now I think at least China is a reluctant competitor, and the U.S. If U.S. wants to stay as the world leader, it has to provide. It has to better provide to the world in order to stay as a leader. If you are a leader or not, it's really not what you claim to be. It's really how you behave, how you are regarded, how you are accepted by the world.
Thank you very much. I think you paved the way to the question I'm going to ask to Asha. Basically, you are here at the Forum of the South in Tangier, and you're being asked, what can you provide? What can the U.S. provide actually
Thank
to
you.
the global South as
yes.
an alternative?
Thank you so much for the question. I would say in terms of, characterizing the relationship, looking at U.S.-China relations overall, you can categorize it in 4 different categories, whether it's competition, cooperation, and then the other 2, neutrality as well as adversarial. I do agree that when you look at the recent San Francisco meeting between President Xi and President Biden, it was overall optimistic and also reinforced cooperation between the two. So with regards to, some of the key elements that they covered, it's very important in terms of the fentanyl issue that is definitely addressed. It is an alarming impact in the United States. So with regards to providing, yes, we are providing in terms of being very energized in addressing this issue. The PRC, as well as the Mexican officials and United States need to come together, and we have the resources, the personnel, the expertise to provide in addressing that issue overall. Providing too also goes along with looking at the other item that was discussed, like you said, the military communication or effective communication, making sure that that's being maintained. United States has been extremely forthcoming in terms of making sure that we do not run into a potential accidental war with China. So as far as providing, we're willing to further synchronize with both in the military side and the non-military side, ensuring that those communications are open at all times. So I think that's very important to note as well. And also, too, in terms of us providing, we're showing extreme commitment to making sure that especially in the Middle East, North Africa, that there's a commitment of ensuring that there is regional stability, ensuring that we're addressing the issue involving Israel-Hamas conflict. That was discussed during the conflict, where President Biden committed to providing as an ironclad supporter to Israel, and also showing his support for the Palestinians. So he's being very forthcoming with it. Unlike the PRC, when it comes to that conflict, looks a little too one-sided with regards to the Palestinians. So I think that for the most part, this relationship is going to be judged based on results and not necessarily based on just talk. Results is really going to, again, drive the relationship. And that is what matters overall. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pass on the buck to PJ Crowley. You were obviously responsible for the U.S. reputation at the State Department and the image for some time. And so you're here at the Global Forum of the South, and you're being asked, what can the United States provide to the Global South in this what is your value added for the Global South if you're being challenged?
Well, the United States is the only true global power in the world today. Now, China is rising. Its global influence is expanding. It remains to be seen, what China's global ambitions are as opposed to its regional ambitions. And I want to comment on something that Ambassador Ying said in the last panel, talking about multipolarity being inherently unstable. I'm not sure about that. To say that we are in a multipolar world, it's obvious. And Khalid, I would say, America's a superpower, China's a superpower, Europe is a superpower in certain dimensions. Saudi Arabia is a superpower in one dimension. So power, the nature of power is changing, and to say that we are in a multipolar world is not destabilizing. It can be actually stabilizing if you're thinking about international relations as a stool. The more legs you have, the more stable you are. And so to say that we're in a multipolar world is not to restrain China from emerging as a global power. It is to recognize that China is a global power. And now the question is, how is China going to use that power, going forward? In terms of the U.S.-China relationship, it is arguably the most consequential bilateral relationship in the world. It is always going to be complex. It is vitally important for the two sides to keep communication, to avoid misunderstandings, to cooperate where possible, to manage conflict where it exists. I think on the economic sphere and the political sphere, that is certainly possible and probably likely. If there's a danger spot, it is in the military realm. And here we do have different conceptions when it comes to rights in international waterways. And China does have a collection of territorial disputes with its neighbors, which complicates whether a certain body of water, whether you're talking about the Taiwan Straits or you're talking about the South China Sea, is that an international waterway? The United States would say yes. Is that a territorial waterway? In certain cases, China will say yes. And so there are areas of potential conflict that have to be effectively managed. And that is one of the reasons why meetings like the meeting with President Xi and President Biden are so important, and their decision to reopen military channels of communication. Because I think at the end of the day, Chinese entrepreneurs understand the United States very well. We understand China very well. On the political realm, we have a robust dialogue among the various agencies of government. The one area where we do need to improve is communication between our military, China's military. That is vitally important.
Okay, I think obviously the San Francisco summit will contribute to that objective. So we basically got two perspectives. We got an economic rising power. We got an planet. So it looks like the cursor of, for particularly countries in the South, is to try to understand whether China can keep its economic growth, how China is doing, what kind of challenges is China confronted to economically on the domestic front, and so and what are the strategies that China can use to try to reach out to the rest of the world. We've seen through the COVID crisis that obviously supply chains needed to be readjusted accordingly. And so I'm happy to introduce, to ask Professor Yang for his opinion on how China's economy will do and contribute to the rest of the world's prosperity.
Yeah, that's a good question, because recently, if we read the news, major news outlets, we obviously see kind of really startling titles like how do we manage China's decline? And if we look at just the number, it sounds like China's GDP versus United States is going to decline this year. And last year, we got like 75% I remain strongly optimistic about China's growth potential. First, China's manufacturing sector is so big. It's actually much larger than many people's imagination. We are today 30% of the world manufacturing value added, actually larger than the sum of United States, Japan, and Germany adding together. Okay. So that's a huge economy. It's not going to go away. Secondly, China is making huge progress on the technological fronts. Right? You just name it: AI, automation, alternative energy, and the EVs. Okay, so China is now moving toward the international technological frontier. Even if we look into the future technologies, China does not lag behind, like fusion, like quantum computing, quantum communication. China is in the forefront. Okay, all those things adding together. Export share in the world. Before pandemic, China's share in world trade was 12%. Today, more than 14%. Right? People also talk about reallocation of industry outside China, but in the end, mostly it's just still Chinese companies exporting not directly from China, but from ASEAN countries, from Mexico. Okay.
And Morocco in the future, I hope.
Yeah, Morocco too. Yeah, we are moving into Morocco, investing into Morocco too. Talking about the headwinds, people are concerned about the lack of consumption in China. I think that's a myth. This year, China's consumption is going to grow by at least 7%, right? I don't have time to get into the details, but that's the case. Aging, yes, Chinese population is aging, population is declining, but you have to factor in other things like technological progress, the improvement of education, and also increase of the retirement age. Many people don't know how ridiculous China's retirement ages are. Women can retire at the age of 50, right? So we still have a huge room. Talking about American export control on China, to me, that's a total failure. China has made a huge progress, even in semiconductor. Right? I would also like to add, as an economist, that that's really detrimental to global innovation, because China shouldn't do that, right? We should rely on international division of labor. We should invest in our own advantage, but we are forced to investing into semiconductor production. But with that, we have succeeded.
Let's have the take from the US on the sanctions over high tech, because it's a bipartisan issue. We thought that after the Trump administration, the sanction would be lowered on high tech in China on the chips, and we've seen actually they've been increased. So it's an interesting trend politically speaking, because it looks like it starts to become a bipartisan consensus. And I'd like to have the take of Mark Ellenbogen over this issue. What do you think about the economic strategy that the US is using to address some concerns over China's industrial, let's say, expansion?
Well, personally, I think there should be more. When you talk, Ambassador, about having negotiation, that essentially has a country presenting a bill of goods that isn't what it says it is. And therefore, when we're talking about the U.S. being a hegemon, the U.S. does a lot of things wrong, and we don't do everything perfectly. But what we do try to do is to get people involved, get people to do it. And we don't do it by, for example, hiring a labor force and paying them peanuts, and also bringing in our own people who are mostly from the prison system. And there are a lot of things that I think China could be and had been, and it's a great culture, and with mathematics and physics and lots of things, but there is one small problem. It is a one-state system, and it is a one-party system, something I reject completely. And so my question isn't just whether the rules are going to be followed and whether the expectation of those playing together can be followed, but whether the two sides, in fact, are playing by the same standards, ethics, and rules, which I simply think China is not, and therefore I think it's okay to have sanctions.
Thank you very much. I'd like to have a take from the European perspectives over sanctions, American sanctions on technology over China. And basically, how does that affect Europe and obviously the rest of the world? Because obviously any sanction system has economic impact and makes technology much more expensive and less performing.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak here. I think it's very important to have global dialogue at a time like this. I think when it comes to Europe's role in this, I hope I'm not going to be a referee between the US and China.
I thought that was Morocco's rule, but it's okay.
I'm happily to give it to Morocco if you want to have that role. But I mean, clearly Europe is involved in these discussions and is affected by them and does take a stance. And I would say it's important to also make the distinction here between where Europe stands when it comes to European security issues, where it is very clear that NATO is the only game in town, that it has to be clear that Russia's aggression against Ukraine is being opposed collectively. But when it comes to economy, when it comes to technological issues, there are also many differences we have between which also is able to deal with the common global issues which we are facing. I think we should never forget that in the background we have the climate crisis. We have to address an issue collectively, which is existential for humankind. So there are many areas where there's competition and cooperation. I would say on competition, we do want to ensure that that competition is fair. And again, we have issues at times with China, but we also have issues at times with the US. I think also that we have to have cooperation, and I think a starting point is to have this kind of global dialogue to also further the understanding, which should involve actors from across the globe, including the South.
Absolutely. I see, for example, climate change and building of technologies and big stimulus packages in the US being extended to both Europe and Morocco through their free trade agreements. Do you think that will pave the way for Chinese companies to start relocate some of their industries to those areas to target both markets?
I think we have to recognize that if we want to tackle climate change globally, the private sector has a huge role to play. So we should look at what is being done in all the major economies. Europe also has a variety of industrial policies now, which I would very much emphasize are aimed at achieving these major transformations. They're not aimed at impeding trade. They're not aimed at a particular country. They're there so that we can also move forward through subsidies, through regulation. So the more cooperation on those issues, the more trade in those areas, the better. But that has to be done within a global system, which also keeps to the rules. And I think this is the major challenge we have at the moment, that the rules-based system is, with all its flaws, but it was something which did help us to cooperate at a global level, but it's not functioning anymore. And we need to find a way of moving forward, including reforming it, but we shouldn't abandon it from any side.
Great. I mean, you basically paved the way to the next question for Mr. Wang. Basically, looking at renewable energy investments, China has invested something like $540 billion this year. The United States, 140, just to give you a proportion. And so it's obvious, even with IEA standards, that the net zero targets for 2030 could not even be close to be achieved without China's involvement. Investments in renewable technologies. Another concerning factor is that on your, for example, solar technologies, we know that your industry is actually running far below its capacity already. And so the market demand is huge. And how can we make China's industry and China's technology be more inclusive to address global challenges and to be dispatched through the BRI initiative and having now a value change that can be more inclusive for the rest of the economies. Europe and the United States obviously being part of a global transition landscape.
Shukla, 1 minute to respond to what you said and then come back to answer your question. Why the Americans dislike one party? What's wrong, one party? When the Chinese people love this party, when they love the President Xi, as the Moroccan people love your king, what's wrong with this?
It creates exactly what China's
okay,
become, a
you
totalitarian
need different parties,
system.
and then you invest like Soros, and then
This is okay.
I answered the question he asked.
Yeah.
Okay. I come back to your question, not quarrel each other. There are three differences, I think, between us. One,
when you've gone to Oxford, you can talk to me
Mark,
like I'm some
please,
idiot.
let's move on.
Okay. What I'm saying that the China-U.S. relations is very complex. It cannot make the reference at either the Cold War or the Asian Greece, whatever. It's looking forward. It's the world. Okay, this is globalization. China and the U.S. mutually independent. Chinese people think about Americans as a beautiful country. So we are not want to replace Americans. So the real problem is Americans. The thing about China rise is challenging American so-called leadership is the city upon the hill, choosing people. So that's the key. Okay, back to the new energy. I think China, we are not just a private capital, but also state-owned enterprises, which do channels to have the innovation of some companies. So that's maybe a little bit different with Americans, because Americans more rely on this alliance to have this kind of innovation. China is more independent from the United States. Everything we should do by ourselves because we are not a U.S. alliance, even with sanctions by the U.S. So that's the reason we should have to do this more quickly.
So what are you going to do with that independence?
Okay, independence then means that technology should be owned by the own government, the people, sovereignty, not just the private capitals, use of the name of freedom, of the multi-party system, democracy, and then to sell your model to the outside world. So that's the reason the BRI is so welcome in this world, because it's reform the globalization from the of capital, by capital, and for capital to of the people, by the people, and for the people. And then more to the better people from this green technology, because China is the largest dynamic market. So in these past years, China's innovation to make this transformation go to digital and green very rapidly. And then again, challenges Americans, maybe IPR or your leadership, and then cause this so-called the batch problem.
But obviously both presidents met and they agreed that they need to cooperate on climate change. We know at the upcoming COP, there is maybe going to be some announcement that will be made. So they both agreed, China and the US will collaborate on climate change. I don't need to tell you what you did to reduce the price of renewable technologies. It's been just amazing. Nobody ever thought this could even be possible. Now, the question is, how will you address, now that you even agree between the United States and your own government, how do you see it coming up to try to tackle climate change effectively? Making your supply chains more inclusive. You say you want to own the technologies, etc. That is fine. But the scale of the challenge that you need to address is significant. It's a planetary challenge. How are you going to do that? How do you see China's, that was the question I asked you.
Okay, I think three things China is doing under the BRI, on the Green Silk Road research. Firstly, we understand that those countries suffered the traditional globalization, not industrialized. For instance, Africa, you have so many sunshine, solar, but you don't have industry. And then wind, and also water, but suffered without enough electricity. Now in Africa, 57% of the African people cannot access to internet. And then the Chinese Huawei, Chinese Zenji, and the Chinese companies come to build 5G for them. This totally, I think, changed the track from the 2G, 3G, 4G, and directly leap forward to reach the 5G. That's the reason, I think, maybe make the American, some private companies, the loss of profits. The second, I think, because the China's market is very huge, so we have lots of the experience how to connect the different regions, like, from the Sichuan and then to Shanghai. So big data in Shanghai and is sent to calculate in Guizhou, and then also electricity, solar panel from Qinghai, and then to support of the Shanghai and other regions. So this we are doing in Africa. And also, lastly, I think most importantly, the costs is most, I think, lowest, because China has the most complete categories of industries. China newly can make everything from the silk to satellite. So state-owned prices and the long-term planning and of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's, I think, benefit for the BRI countries.
Okay. So let's talk about BRI. What is your take on how China can deploy?
Then there's no way we can achieve inclusiveness. So the PRC has to follow the rules in order to show up, in order for inclusiveness to be more apparent.
Okay.
Thanks for the moderator. And I think the essence of science and technology is cooperation, not computation. So science and technology is a common fortune for mankind. It can promote the progress of the entire world. So sanction any country, sanction any other countries, companies cannot stop the progress of science and technology, and also cannot make a country greater again and again. So that's why there is no competition between China and the US in the field of science and technology. It is a cooperation. As the moderator said, so from the BRI, the cooperation between China and the US on fighting climate change, on AI, global governance is so important. It related to the future of the mankind. So I was surprised when I came to the beautiful country. I was surprised by the renewable energy here in Morocco. Okay, so around 40% of your electricity came from solar, which surprised me. And I think it is one of the very important platform for China and the US and Morocco and European companies to work together for the renewable energy which can be developed here in Morocco and in Africa. So Morocco is an intersection of Africa, Europe, Asia, and American. It can play an extremely important role to further the globalization.
Thank you. I'm going to ask, so by the way, solar and wind. I'm Sahara wind, so I cannot say only solar.
I want to add, in this year, the new power plant, which built in China, over 60 of new power plant are renewable power plant. Wind, solar, okay, it's not the traditional coal-fired. It's not a traditional carbon-based power plant. I think we can share the experience with the whole world. It is a cooperation. It is for the future of mankind. Thank you.
Absolutely, and we'll have the first wind desalination power plant for agriculture in the Sahara Desert that will be powered by Chinese wind turbines.
Yes.
It's coming up. So that's to make sure we can sustain agriculture in the face of climate change. So fundamental, water, access to water and livelihood. I'm going to ask a question to both of you, Ambassador Ying and PJ. What do you think will be the defining issue which will bring together the United States and China to agree on to cooperate in this century versus not? So maybe I'll ask PJ first.
Let me give you a positive defining issue and a negative defining issue. I think the positive defining issue is climate change, and the ability of China and the United States as the two leading economic powers in the world, to continue to advance economically while reducing a reliance on fossil fuels is vitally important. If the United States doesn't do its part, and if China doesn't do its part, the world cannot solve, the challenge of climate change. And in key parts of the world and in key parts of this region, we will get hotter. We'll have more droughts. We'll have more migration. We'll have greater, global instability. So this can be the defining area of cooperation. I think where there is a potential risk in the relationship, it is with respect to Taiwan. The United States policy with respect to Taiwan is ambiguous, deliberately. From a U.S. standpoint, we have acknowledged China's view that Taiwan is part of China. We also recognize that Taiwan is a self-governing island. It is a vibrant democracy. However the relationship between Taiwan and the mainland is resolved, it has to be resolved peacefully. In my term at the White House, after my term at the White House, I was honored to accompany President Clinton as a private citizen back to Shanghai for a trip, and he had a meeting with President Jiang Zemin. Jiang was about to leave office and turn over power to President Hu Jintao, and they were reflecting on their work together. But President Jiang, when he touched on the issue of Taiwan, he said, we don't have to resolve this anytime soon. Now, in fairness, that conversation happened 20 years ago. So from a U.S. standpoint, when we hear President Xi say that we need to resolve the issue of Taiwan sooner rather than later, to an American ear, it represents something of a shift. And the dilemma here is that there probably is no way to resolve this politically. There probably is not a way to resolve this economically, which means that from a U.S. standpoint, if China is determined to resolve the issue of Taiwan, it will do so militarily. Mark referred to the Cold War, and I think the analogy of the relationship between China and the United States, the Cold War doesn't fit, except in one small thread. During the Cold War, we had something called MAD, mutually assured destruction. There was a nuclear concept. You fire nuclear missiles at us, we'll fire nuclear missiles at you, and the end result is we really shouldn't do either one of those things. In the relationship between the United States and China, there is a form of MAD today. It is an economic form of mutually assured destruction. And I think if you're optimistic about the issue of Taiwan, then you would recognize that the moment that there is a confrontation between the Chinese Navy and the US Navy in the Taiwan Straits, which is a vital waterway to the global economic system, were there to be that competition, it is entirely likely that the world would immediately go into a global recession. And so in this form of mutually assured destruction economically, The question is whether that will be a deterrent that says to China, we understand your concern about Taiwan. We understand your desire to resolve the issue, but it has to be done peacefully without a confrontation, between the world's two strongest economies, because in that scenario, no one wins.
Okay, we got your two critical points. Ambassador Ying, what would be your take on what will bring together United States and China, and what can undermine it?
There are so many points. First, on Taiwan, I think it's a fundamental issue between China and U.S. And it's very important that the U.S. Stays with its commitment. And for the mainland, for the mainland of China, we prefer peaceful unification in any political document it's stated. And then we have a law in place which does not renounce the possibility of military solutions, because there is the danger of Taiwan going independence, especially there is a concern in China that Taiwan can be instigated moving in that direction. So I think U.S. Politicians need to be aware that they should leave the Taiwan issue for the Chinese to solve. And any outside involvement will only alert the mainland side, making things tense. About the maritime security, South China Sea is I think the second largest or the largest commercial navigation route. But I think there is an exaggeration about China's activities in South China Sea threatening the commercial navigation, because the very important indicator, when you want to find out, the best indicator is to check in London the premium for commercial shipping. If the price goes up, security goes up, that means the commercial world are worried, but very seldom. I observe it very closely, rarely.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to move on, if I may, on the positive side, because we have
Zhumin, we were in a dinner, and Martin said, China cannot stop growing, US cannot be afraid of China's growth, so there's no solution. So I said, can you offer us a way out? He said, if there is an invasion from Mars, China and US will work together. So for all these years, we were looking for Mars invasion type of issues.
Can the climate be that invasion?
Yes, climate, AI, these will be the things that can unite the two countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure hearing your insights on one of the defining issues of the century. We have 10 minutes for questions, so I'm going to take chronologically. You first. Please introduce yourself. Yes, go ahead, just speak.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me the ability to speak today. I would like to introduce myself first. My name is Zuhair El-Hor. I'm a first-year political student at the International University of Rabat. I would like to ask you about the USA and the China conflict that has been over a long time. As you know, the China President Xi Jinping visited San Francisco this 15th of November to have a discussion with about the President Xi. Will the USA take someday China as allies and become someday friends and keep peace between them?
Thank you very much. So the comment on the dictator allegation on Chinese head of state, I think the media, Chinese media, has been downplaying it. Any follow-up on maybe the US? Okay, first, and then we'll have China's response.
Well, what's driving a characteristic that President Biden said, it's more reflective on principles. So going back to what can bring together the relationship versus what can also bring it, create that wedge, is not coming to achieving shared principles. And this is exactly what President Biden underscored with his meeting with President Xi. We are going to be defending our principles and values abroad, right? So with regards to, for instance, mistreatment towards the Uyghurs in this region as well as in Western China, is something we're going to clash with, right? We're not going to agree with it.
We're talking dictator, the allegation. Just to be specific, we have many other questions.
Okay.
So I'll pass it on. And we've seen the reaction of the Secretary of State when
unification. So that's the reason Chinese people approved the Communist Party leadership and the President Xi's leadership. We need this leadership to improve our living standard. So who challenges this leadership? This challenges China's human rights. Second, President Xi, if you say so-called the dictatorship, what's the meaning of the dictatorship? That means without election, he always permanent on power. President Xi was not chosen as a leader from the beginning. He grown up from the county and then city and then province and then gradually for more than 20 years, right? Election in a party, selection by the people. Thirdly, President Xi, if you say dictatorship, what the President Xi works is for his private family's interests. He's saving in Switzerland, the bank is way higher. You can check. Yeah. What he work for?
Okay, thank you very much. And it was also important to note the reaction of the Chinese media that downplayed this comment. And so that shows you that China is actually able to look beyond the remarks that was made. Please, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Emmanuel Selame. I come from the Embassy of Liberia in Morocco. My question has to do with my continent, Africa. I'm of the opinion that our continent does not want to revert to what it was in the Cold War, where Africa became an arena of contest between the then global powers. Today, the continent of Africa maintains diplomatic relations with both the People's Republic of China and United States of America. And the two great nations got specific policies towards Africa. Now, African nations are burdened with debt. My question is, how does China, what is China thinking towards the financing of our projects, especially infrastructural projects, building hydro dam, so that those projects will be able to finance themselves and reduce the debt burdens of African nations?
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Who would like to answer, please?
That's a good question. I mean, China has done a lot in helping the developing countries. But we also understand many developing countries have problems in managing the economy here and there. So I hope that donors from China can work together with local people to select the projects more on commercial basis. China is also on a learning curve, right? So we are newly emerging in this donor society. We are learning from other countries, all right? So I think this debt issue will be just temporary with efforts from local people and the Chinese donors, we're going to solve this problem.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
So for the infrastructure investment, it is a huge one. It looks like create some debt. However, infrastructure is not the goal. Infrastructure is a main base for industrialization. So the goal for every continent, include Africa, is industrialization. Industrialization is a final goal because it can promote and increase people's living standard and let everybody can get a job. It is a job creation. So as the Chinese proverb said, if you want to get rich, build a road first. Build a road is not the main goal. It is a way. So that's why now President Xi Jinping proposed a new project called small yet smart project. It is a livelihood project. Eventually, we want to shift the model of investment. We want to focus on more livelihood projects which can improve people's living standard and give more people skills for find a job, like a Luban workshop in many countries. And eventually, we want to invest so many vocational schools, help the local people to get skills to find a good job. Thanks.
Okay, learning curve. Next question on the back, and then we'll come to you. Please be concise. We have very limited time for your question. Rise up, and so you can be given a mic.
Hello, my name is Hussein bin Saud. I study at the University of Luxembourg, LLM litigations. I would like to ask about, before to ask, I will just mention in a few seconds, from a historical perspective, that Peloponnesian War was between Athens and Sparta, and related as the end to disruption of trade routes and impacts in everyone there. So I would like to ask now, as long as the China representative or the China perspective and as well US perspective, this route is leading to a war, a full scale or in some form. There will be a war. So it's a speculation, but anyway, I would like to know what is your opinion regarding the small states that is impacted by your decision. For example, in Africa, it is impacted by one or another, and so other states all over the world.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's have the next question so we can address them both. Go ahead.
So my question would be about, I heard Mrs. Hernandez and Mr. Ellen Bogan talked about rules. He said, and you said that in order to be inclusive, we have to follow the rules. So my question would be, which rules and whose rules? How could we work following rules that are one part that belong to one part? Why should we follow them when it's not rules that we all agreed on? And my second question would be to the Chinese side, and it would be about China is investing in Africa, and Africa has a story about traps and misleading countries. And so my question would be, why should we believe that China is coming to help and coming to share its knowledge with Africa that tries to involve as much as China is involving? That's my two
questions. Thank you very much. So we have basically the rules. Who are they made for? And I'll ask Mr. Hernandez to address that. We have a feeling that the rules-based system is actually benefiting those who set the rule. That's the concern we have, and beyond the United States, because we know how the rule-based system has been made. Discussion has been made on UN Security Council on how the system is made. So we'd like to have your take, and then we'll address the second question.
Yes, I mean, when I joined the administration since then, and no longer part of it, but we have played a role in ensuring that as a international community, we set those rules with our allies and partners and those that are along with in the international community. And there's been a lot of work in that, whether it's at the United Nations, other multilateral institutions that set those rules. And the PRC can come in and join and be part of that process. But as far as implementation goes, the PRC has to respect those rules. So there's a lot of activities in terms of United States, along with many countries around the world, where we are creating those rules together, which helps achieve inclusiveness.
Okay. Together, it's also, we know when they were created and how fast they're evolving. We're not quite satisfied with the
I would like to take a stab at this before you ignore me. Thank you. The fact is, it is a fight between values. And it is true that the United States is putting forth its and believes that they are the better ones. And China is putting forth theirs, and they are saying it is the better one. This doesn't have to do with economics. It doesn't have to do with a lot of things. I don't have to stop
you
it.
don't have evidence.
So therefore, this is what happens. I'm not going to stop that.
You don't have evidence.
You can ignore reality, but it's true.
Okay, Mark. Now let's have China's response, Ambassador.
You have to use
no. Please,
right?
Mr. Wang. I'm going to ask you not to respond to that. In terms of China, what's in for how different are you from previous superpowers and economic powerhouses over, let's say, the African continents? What do you have? What is your value compared to what's your difference?
One of the reasons that the Chinese people are very angry about U.S. bashing is because the U.S., especially the politicians, can base their accusations on misinformation. They don't care. They don't bother check. They just hear something and criticize China. The criticism changes from time to time, but the deeper condescending tone is what really annoys the Chinese. The message is that we are the sole only right value political system in the world. So if you have a different system, you should be sanctioned. You should be ostracized. The differences between China and US is that, yes, we believe in our system. We like it to succeed. We work very hard, and we're succeeding. And we respect US having its own political system, being successful or not in its own country. We watched US. US is not perfect. You have lots of problems, but we don't come in condescendingly telling you that you should change your system. You should have reform. It's your problem. And with the Africans, it's the same. The African countries have their own positions, their own views. But if they welcome China's help, China comes in and builds railways, but it's not for a charity. Most of the economic cooperations are commercial, but China does not want to poke nose into the Africans' domestic affairs. Our Morocco students, for example, you raised the question: how do you like your system being criticized? How do you like your head of state being named names? So we, the developing countries, we've had enough. We've had enough. So I hope it's important for the Americans to learn the lesson from Iraq, from Afghanistan. Remember your slogan of changing Iraq, transforming the political system, and Afghanistan, how successful you are. So let's all keep their political system within their boundaries and let others find their own way out.
Okay, thank you. Mutual respect. We got the point. Next question, if we can have one on the back. Please rise up. You'll get the microphone. Rise up. Oui. 1 minute. Okay. That will be the last question. We have to close. So please try and be concise.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nuhaila Lashkar, a student from a School of Information Science. First of all, I want to thank you for the clarification of this significant subject. And my question is, why are we still not seeing remarkable effects in the world as a result of this union of the two powers? Are we going to judge this collaboration, since Ms. Castleberry said earlier that we are judging this relationship by the results? Or are there any other manipulators such as different ideologies and cultural backgrounds that are not easy to surpass? In conclusion, is it time for the rest of the world to interact to create a synergy and to solve the problems? Thank you.
The role of the rest of the world in this confrontation, in a nutshell. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. When you have the ChatGPT to search Taiwan, only simplify Chinese and Arabic says rule-based UN Resolution 2070-58 that Taiwan is part of China. All other languages, they are fake news, said Taiwan is not part of China, including what the gentleman said, millions of the killings.
We're not going to
so
bring
that's
it up.
rules. Rules. What are the rules? Actually,
okay,
now,
It's not just me.
the BI, the standard is higher than the Americans. They're faster than.
We talked over this issue. Let's go ahead, please, on Europe's stand. How can Europe come in and try to temper U.S.-China passions?
Yes.
Fevers.
I mean, I think when it comes to these global questions, I think the question of respect and trust has already been mentioned, and I think there have to be ways we can build that on a global level, and that does mean a much more inclusive international system, going beyond not just US and China. I think Europe also has a bigger role to play in making the system more open. But the reality is, I think Europe can also provide an experience which is important in this. Because when it comes to issues such as economic exchanges, to technology, to climate change, to all of these issues where we should cooperate, yes, we all agree that it's common sense to cooperate. But there are many issues which come into this. There are security issues which come into that. There are questions of economic competition. There are questions of having to deal with the global commons in a way which is more sensible than we have up to now. And our experience in Europe is you have to build that over a very long time. It's something which is very difficult, but you have to build organizations, you have to build common rules. And I mean common, not just determined by someone. And you have to build that on the basis of respect and trust.
Thank you very much. With those wise words, we are closing this. We have to close it. What would it be?
So I want to share a word which given by my parents. When all cars are coming and when all cars are driving and coming towards you, you'd better to think maybe you are on the wrong way. Thank you.
Okay. And with Europe's experience in collaboration and trying to build a way forward, we look forward having the United States and China look at how Europe managed to overcome their past, bloody and very hard. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much for having attended this panel. I ask you for a round of applause, and thank you very much once more.